Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, March 19th. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see remnants of a gale in the West Pacific, still generating maybe 17-foot seas, pushing to the west, targeting primarily Hawaii, with a small gale trying to finally develop in the Gulf of Alaska. This is the start of a significant pattern change expected for at least the next week. We'll start off our tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when they do form, help direct their path. The long-anticipated consolidation of the North Pacific jet stream is well underway. Not particularly strong, as you can see, only little pockets of 150-knot winds, but the jet is consolidated, pushing to the east from Japan, reaching almost to the California coast as of 18Z Sunday. That is a significant improvement over where we've been the past week or multiple weeks with split jet, upper level circulations, all kinds of stuff going on, just tearing the jet apart. Now, finally, we have a consolidated flow. That means more energy, a little bit of a trough off Japan. Troughs help support a counterclockwise flow aloft. You can actually see some energy pointing down into here. Counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And, of course, low pressure generates wind. Wind generates seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area and start to decay, produces swell. And swell, of course, makes surf when it hits your beach. Anyway, consolidated jet in play and forecast to continue. Notice the trough starts digging out on Monday here as it approaches the dateline. Another trough starts building off the U.S. West Coast. That will help support that low pressure system we saw developing in the Gulf and a new system perhaps starting to build in the far West Pacific. Anyway, as we get into Tuesday, more of the same. One trough there, another trough building off Japan. And as you can see, as the jet starts moving onshore over California, that will, of course, bring weather and snow to the Sierra and rain to the central and North California coast and possibly down into Southern California. Anyway, we get into Wednesday, and the first trough starts moving onshore California. The second trough is moving into the Gulf of Alaska, and a new trough starts building off Japan, much more vigorous with winds pushing 170 knots. That is good for storm development. We'll just roll this out. First trough onshore by Wednesday night. More energy coming behind that. Look at that. Another trough pushing off California. This a broad, large trough. Not particularly strong, but still a pretty good-sized trough by Friday, approaching the dateline. And the beat just sort of rolls on. The next trough pushes onshore California on Saturday. Consolidated energy behind that. We'll roll this out. We continue on. More energy building 180 hours out. No sign of any split. And the interesting part about all this is theoretically, you look at some data and it suggests the active phase of the MJO is nowhere to be found. Other data suggests that it is. And clearly, this sort of indicates that the active phase is in play at some level in the atmosphere, because typically you don't see this sort of a setup unless the active phase is in control. And that's what we've been expecting. It's been on the charts. We've been talking about it for a long time. We were thinking sometime around, let's say 18th to the 23rd of March. And this time it appears we're pretty much right on track. Let's go take a look down at the surface. Here we go. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. One low pressure system fading in the Gulf of Alaska. Just barely 30-knot winds, mainly 25-knot winds. This guy is fading out. New system developing in the Gulf of Alaska, 30-knot winds. Nothing particularly strong, but anything will take it. On Monday, 30-knot winds. Now notice the fetch is mainly aimed here at Central California, even down into Southern California. Very west-angled swell possibly could result. Anyway, keep on rolling into Tuesday. This system moves onshore. The broader system in the West Pacific fades out. But remember, there's a new steep trough building over Japan. And sure enough, bingo. Here we go. Storm developing. 55, right under the tag there. 55-knot winds. Maybe we can get a bit. You can't see it there either. 55-knot winds. That's a storm. Winds in excess of 50 knots are storm status. 35 to 50 knots are gale status. Anyway, and a new gale developing in the Western Gulf on Wednesday. Wednesday is the day. And a little bit of 40-knot winds. still a little bit of 55-knot winds right there. Into Wednesday, 50-knot winds into Wednesday night, approaching the dateline. Two systems, you can just follow them as they traverse the Pacific. One moving onshore into the Pacific Northwest on Friday. The other system still with 40-plus knot winds, pushing into the dateline on Friday. Oh, look at that. A little bit of resurgence on supposedly Friday night, 45-knot winds. Wouldn't believe any of that this far out. But that's a nice tease. And then that system starts fading out. Still bits of fetch here. Remnants at 180 hours out. Notice more energy building here. We saw the jet building. And another little patch right here. High pressure trying to get a little bit of a toe in the door here to California. Suspect that may not really happen. There's a lot going on in the atmosphere, and the bias seems to be in favor of storm development if you believe the models. Let's go take a look down at the ocean. We're going to start looking at hindcast data first here. This is from Wednesday of last week. Small system. Remember, this is the start of the system that we see just remnants of now in the West Pacific. The point being, the system has generated some swell. There you see 32-foot seas on Wednesday, kind of petered out, then regrouped off the Kuril Islands right here with, what is that, 23 and a half foot seas, holding into Friday, Saturday, and then fading out on Sunday. Swell from this system bound for Hawaii. Nothing huge, rather small, but waves nonetheless. Some of that energy should reach California as well, but pretty well decayed in size. And now, forecast data, starting, of course, 18Z Sunday, remnants of the Northwest Pacific system, the little gale right here off the U.S. West Coast. That's what we're watching. What is that, 17-foot seas, pushing towards mainly central California. That's probably good for about 11-second period wind swell, but certainly down into southern California as well, displaced well to the south. And then another system starts forming just east of the dateline on Tuesday night, but of more interest, the system off Japan already building. Remember, 55-knot winds there, 36-foot seas, quickly ramping up. And so we have two systems in flight. We're up to 43-foot seas by Wednesday morning and 45-foot seas by Wednesday night. Also notice, what is that, 20, 22, 24-foot seas north of Hawaii. Maybe good for some sideband swell there, but that's going to be nothing compared to what's coming here. This system very well to the south, very pretty decent-sized, longer period west swell possible for Hawaii if one believes the models. We're only 78 hours out from that, so not too bad. Anyway, this system continues pushing towards California. Good for weather and some swell. Good energy still associated with the West Pacific swell even into Friday night. So we're talking a 48-hour duration at least. And then it rejuvenates a little bit with seas up into 37 feet, let's say. Pushing into the Western Gulf. Finally fading out. You can actually see the swell energy starting to hit Hawaii. We'll actually go back there and you can just see the swell front moving towards Hawaii and then eventually towards the U.S. West Coast. Good run of activity. Also notice a little hook starting to develop off of Japan, maybe something else, but never believe a model 180 hours out. We barely believe it's 72 hours out. But anyway, it's a nice tease, gives you an idea of what is to come, and what is to come is certainly better than where we've been for the past, I don't know, since sometime in January when last time we saw some swell. So there's hope, and that is a good thing. It's a little bit early in the southern hemi-season, but looking at hindcast data, Tuesday of last week, a little system developed here just on the hairy east edge of the southern California swell window, 30-foot seas, and if you actually looked at the wind models, most of this was generated from south fetch, so somewhat aimed, San Clemente is basically about 117 west, something like that. So this swell is this fetch is barely in the southern Cal swell window, certainly for Mexico, certainly for Central America. This system actually picked up a little bit into 18Z Wednesday, 34-foot seas, aimed reasonably well to the north, and then it faded out and moved out, and that was pretty much the end of that. And then we'll do a quick spin through the forecast data because there is, as you can see, little bits of energy starting to develop. Forecast Monday, Tuesday, not even 30-foot seas, probably no swell for Tahiti for sure. U.S. West Coast, probably not. And again, Another little patch of energy on Friday. Stronger seas here. What's that? 41 feet, but over such a tiny footprint. Basically, it's like throwing a pebble into a giant pool. And how much of a ripple are you going to get out of that? Probably not a whole lot. If you're through a big old brick in there, you get a lot more. So this is our pebble, not doing a whole lot. We'll just roll this out. But we're starting to get into the season where at least it's worth taking a gander to the south here, keeping our eyes on what's going on. And of course, we'd be remiss if we did not look at the local forecast, at least for California in terms of precipitation. Cloudy skies in the San Francisco Bay Area this evening, almost threatening to rain, but no rain really expected per the models until you get into Monday evening. First system starts really winding up off the coast, precip moving in, kind of high snow levels in Tahoe, confined to, let's say, higher peaks of Yosemite Tuesday morning, but that should start lowering as you work your way through the day, and we'll get into the snow models here in a second. But you see continued precipitation, a bit of a break come Wednesday night, and then the next batch moves in come Friday, and more snow, heavier snow into Saturday morning, that fading out, and then let's just roll this out, and maybe some more behind that. Let's take a look at the snow models. And like we said last week, these are now posted. You can go to the site, take a look. It's down here under the models section. You go to the weather models, and you'll see it down at the bottom of the page there. Anyway, roll this out. This is the new 240-hour GFS long range. Just sort of get a look, and you see the first bit of snow starting to show up on Tuesday. You can look at the totals down here, amount of snow for select resorts in the Tahoe region. Starting to get pretty solid, lower snow levels by 4 p.m. on Tuesday. That kind of peters out. And then get a little bit more into Wednesday. Through Wednesday night, we're talking 9 inches basically along the crest. And then we keep going here. Things kind of, not a whole lot happens till you get into Friday now. And then a little bit heavier snow event starts happening. You're all Friday, Saturday, light snow. And then you're up from 9 inches. You're now into 29 inches. So maybe, let's say, 20 more inches of snow for the Tahoe region by Saturday night. Things drying out on Sunday, and then more behind that into Monday, supposedly. Now, the deal with, and we'll just roll this out here to 240 hours. There you go. The deal with the models is they've been tending to push saying a lot of snow up front, and then the closer you get to that, it keeps creeping out further and further out into the forecast. As we suspect these totals are probably 32 inches over the next 10 days, probably a bit on the high side. And here's some other data. Same data from the model we just saw, 240-hour model. This is something we're playing with, but you can see 6-hour increments, and this is just for Squaw Valley, but we've got this for multiple resorts across the U.S., mainly confined to the western U.S. 6-hour increments. The amount of snow in that 6-hour increment, like 3.4 inches on Tuesday through Tuesday at 18Z. Another 4.5 inches in the late afternoon. You kind of go down. Here's another 7-inch, another 7-inch dump or so. Then here's the cumulative amount over the period up to, it pretty much flatlines here at 32.6 as of Monday night, 32.6 inches. So that's something we're working on. At some point, we'll build this out, clean it up a little bit, get it posted on the site, but it might be a couple of weeks. We'll see. Anyway, just wanted to show you that. So let's take a look long term. What's going on with Madden-Julian Oscillation and the El Nino Southern Oscillation? The MJO, of course, a cycle that runs across the Pacific in 3 to 4 week intervals, active phase and inactive phase. And, of course, ENSO, which is El Nino La Nina, a year or two long cycle. With pretty much every 5 to 7 years, you get some sort of a El Nino call it an active phase, if you will, embedded in there, and then tending to be neutral or inactive the rest of the time. So as usual, we like to look at winds across the equatorial Pacific, East Pacific here, West Pacific here. There's New Guinea. Dateline right there. As you can see, trades, this is all from the TAO buoy array. Hard buoys lined up across the equator from 2 degrees north, 2 degrees south. You can't really beat that. This is a 5-day mean, so it's not exactly what's happening right now, but the 5-day mean has suggested, as you can see, trades in control. They look pretty strong, but for this time of year, we look at the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. You see, in fact, winds are very calm. Well, not calm. They're neutral. This is normal. These winds are normal in the East Pacific this time of year, but still blowing pretty hard from the east on the dateline region. That typically would suggest the inactive phase of the MJO, but we've seen what the dateline is doing. We're seeing what the storm track is, and that doesn't quite equate. So what we're thinking is this is the last gasp of La Nina, not so much the inactive phase of the MJO, but it could be the last blast gasp of the inactive phase as well. And we'll get into the details here in a second. Then we'll look at the forecast. It's 850 millibar zonal wind anomaly. So this is the east-west component of the wind only. Oranges and yellows are westerly anomalies, and the blues and purples are easterly anomalies, suggestive of the inactive phase of the MJO. Dateline's right here. The Kelvin wave generation area, the main area we monitor for creation of Kelvin waves and also for enhancing the jet. Between these two tick marks, going down in time, we see persistent easterly anomalies in this region. And here is where we are today. That continues. And if anything, they are again supposed to pulse a little bit. So this seems to be a bit divorced from what's going on with the MJO and is more attributable to the remnants of La Nina. And we say that because we believe that the active phase of the MJO is starting to move into this area right here, and theoretically these winds should dissipate, but they're not, so we're attributing it to La Nina. So here is outgoing long wave radiation forecast, a good way to monitor the MJO. Yellows are positive anomalies, suggesting more sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, outgoing long wave radiation, okay, which suggests high pressure, which suggests clear skies. The blues are less negative anomalies, meaning more cloud cover, meaning the active phase of the MJO. And basically, the forecast for the next 2 weeks, no change. Now, remember this, because you're going to see there's some of the models are playing this game a little bit differently, so this suggests, the statistic model suggests weak inactive phase for the next 2 weeks, with the active phase bottled up over here. The GEFS ensemble suggests the same thing, only a building inactive phase, and that's a real head scratcher because the jet stream is just supposed to be going to town, and the data already suggests that it is getting much more strength and reach off to the East Pacific, and so this doesn't make sense. Next up, we take a look at phase diagrams. Where is the active phase of the MJO? Assume you're looking down on the North Pole. The MJO travels from west to east from the Indian Ocean and over the equator, from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, say Bali, to over the dateline West Pacific, south of U.S., north of Africa, and back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is right now. Indian Ocean, just what we saw in the other charts. Same here per the GEFS model. And the forecast is no real change. Everything just stays balled up here. And if anything, the GEFS model says, if anything, it's going to retrograde back into the Indian Ocean. So here's the upper level, think jet stream precipitation forecast model. Equator right here. The greens are suggesting the areas of enhancement for precipitation. And notice there is definitely a trend going across here like this, suggesting, and the greens typically suggest the active phase of the MJO. Now this would be a very weak and a rather dry active phase of the MJO is where the greens are. This suggests a rather weak and dry active phase of the MJO, but nonetheless some sort of active phase working its way across the Pacific from now through about 8th of April or so, and this runs about 2 weeks ahead of what goes on down at the surface. Then the inactive phase sets up about the 3rd of April in the West Pacific, working its way across, and then another active phase as we get later into April and a little bit stronger. Of course, this model changes every day, and it's a very loose approximation because you're talking 40 days out, but it gives you so this sort of contradicts what we're seeing in the other two models. And then the CFS model, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies, again, Dateline, here you go. Well, you can't really see it here in this image, but dateline is right here, and this one runs from the bottom to the top. So the Kelvin wave generation area is right here. The blues are easterly anomalies. Clearly, we see that's the case. They're forecast to go for maybe another week. And then a big change sets up. A week out, they die, and notice westerly anomalies are projected for the foreseeable future and pretty strong. And now notice, if you go down here and look, this previous through November, you see no real westerly anomalies. This easterly anomaly pattern, of course, associated with La Nina. But then, after this, about a week from now, there's this hard break and the pattern is supposed to change. So let's overlay the MJO first. Okay, so when we were talking about the MJO, inactive phase of the MJO, here it is, dotted lines, okay, and dotted contour. Okay, so basically, it's all but gone. As we move in time, even 3 or 4 days from now, the inactive phase of the MJO is supposed to be gone. Here comes the active phase, already building towards the date line as of today. Okay, and this is why we're saying the easterly anomalies are not attributable to the inactive phase of the MJO, at least not anymore. Maybe a little bit of hangover from it, but really it's attributable to La Nina. And as the active phase of the MJO starts pushing into the West Pacific, we're going to start getting westerly anomalies, according to this model, in the West Pacific. That's only going to help the jet stream. Now the sad part is it's a kind of day late and a dollar short, because we're pretty late in that we're moving into spring now, and the atmosphere is already starting to want to not support storm development as much, but we'll take whatever we can get. Now let's overlay the low pass filter here, and this shows you this dotted contour is effectively La Nina, and this says La Nina is supposed to be gone by, and this is a bit of a reach, but let's say April 22, something like that. Okay, and El Nino, here we go down here, the solid contour starts developing over the Kelvin wave generation area by late April or so. Okay, so again, remember, we'll take this out of here, get the noise out of here, look at the wind setup and what's going on, and you can clearly see it's this El Nino sort of hint of a pattern which is driving the westerly anomalies and the demise of La Nina, and that's why the easterly anomalies are going to dissipate, and then we're going to start moving into a more normal pattern, and then maybe even a westerly anomaly enhanced pattern. That can only help the jet stream, and maybe some in the southern hemisphere. We'd say later in the summer, not early in the summer. But maybe there'll be more potential for storm development later in the summer relative to the northern hemisphere here. So something to consider. And again, so some of the models saying inactive phase, or it looks like the inactive phase is going to hold on, but what's really happening is, no, that's just the fading remnants of La Nina, and something maybe better is coming long term. Now looking down into the ocean, this is even a little bit more interesting. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This again is the TAO buoy array data. These are the anchor lines from the buoys going at depth. The X's are the sensors on those anchor lines. Okay, and you can see warm water all balled up here in the West Pacific, and then the 28-degree isotherm line not even making it to the date line, but the 26-degree isotherm line here is pretty solid, making its way. It's gotten a lot deeper. This warm water here at the surface was extremely shallow 3 or 4 weeks ago. All of a sudden, it started ballooning up. This guy's winds really started dying over in this area, and sunlight heating, helps create warm water. What's also going on is there's a lot of warm water building up off of South America too, getting caught by the trades, starting to move off to the west, and that's helping to thicken the isotherm line. Here, in fact, here's anomalies differences from normal this time of year. You see now La Nina had negative anomalies up to 4 degrees at depth here, back in the March-April time frame, what was it, last year. But now we see pretty much normal temperatures the whole way across the Pacific and slightly warmer than normal here. Now, if we were going to get into some real El Nino thing, we'd expect to see 3 and 4 degree anomalies over here. We don't see any of that. So even if trades did reverse, you got a super active phase of the MJO. There isn't any warm water here to push to the east in the form of a Kelvin wave, or not much, just enough to sort of get this sort of marginal, lukewarmish sort of pattern going, but nothing more. This other model depiction sort of suggests some sort of a weak Kelvin wave is actually in flight. I don't know if we'd really call it a Kelvin wave. Yes, it's warming compared to what we were, but it's, we're talking half a degree or something like that, maybe a degree. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But anyway, warm water is certainly better than cool water, and that again supports the jet stream, supports the storm track. So all the data so far suggests that we're kind of moving into a somewhat more favorable environment for storm production. Unfortunately, it's kind of late in the year, but you know what? We knew this year was going to be sacrificed to La Nina. It's just the way it goes. You always get some sort of a La Nina activity after a pretty good El Nino. So we had already, expectation was, our expectations were low for this year. We were not disappointed, but there was surf. But things are returning to normal now. Balance of heat in the upper 300 meters of the ocean back April 2016, a year ago. La Nina, cool water moving from West Pacific to the east. It didn't hang around very long. By November, it was already in decline. And here's where we are now with, 0 to half a degree above normal anomalies across the entire Pacific, and building 0.5 to 1 degree anomalies over in the East Pacific. And again, some off here, but not a lot of warm water in the west. Still, pretty homogeneous sort of pattern. Of more interest here is actual water anomaly temperatures across the Pacific. Now check this out. Warm water, what is that? 4 degree anomalies here off of northern Peru, and 2 to 4 degree anomalies down into Chile off Ecuador. Now what we had noticed is a week ago and 2 weeks ago, these temperatures sort of backed off a little bit, but now they're starting to grow again. The other thing we noticed is some cool water developed out in here about 2 weeks ago. That has all disappeared again. So we have a lot of warm water building here along the coast, starting to get caught by trades, pushing off to about 105 west, and that's pretty solid, and also warming up into Mexico. I mean, a big pool of warming here. The point being, La Nina had some cool water going on here. If you get strong trades, it'll start causing upwelling. But you know what? That's not really happening. Out to a point south, there's Hawaii right there. So south of Hawaii, pretty good footprint of warmer than normal water. You look at the trend for the past 7 days, we had not cooling, but just a neutral pattern here last week. Now you notice warming starting to occur along Peru again. Certainly we had warming over the Galapagos, and that continues. But look at this. There's sort of this tip of the spear kind of pattern going on here from Peru out to the date line and up into Baja. So actually, it was really well defined off of California into Hawaii and down in here a couple of days ago. It's moderated just a little bit, but still pretty pronounced, suggesting some sort of warming going on. We're not going to call it El Nino, though. There is a bit of that hype going on the internet, but we're in. The other thing is we're in the spring unpredictability barrier that runs from roughly March through early June, and strange thing can happen, but it's not till you really get June, July. That some sort, whether you've got momentum and a pattern going on. This is all favorable, looks good. We're not holding our breath yet. We have a couple of months. If it keeps doing that, then we'll be more impressed. But here's the overview pattern, and you can see clearly that warmth along Peru. This is all in the Nino 1.2 region. Here out to about 120. All this has to start making it over into here, the Nino 3.4 region, from 120 west to 170 west, 5 degrees north and south. Put a box around that. And you can see there's still La Nina cool water here, little pockets. This is leftovers from when La Nina kind of pulsed for a little bit, maybe 2 weeks ago, but it's since backed off, this warm water working its way this way. In fact, let's go look at the trends for these two regions. So here we go. Here's the Nino 1.2 region, the area right close there to South America. You can see it was generally slightly warm, but it really took off coming about February 12th or so. And temperatures have been on steady upswing up to plus 2.8 degrees above normal. That's quite warm. Now, let's compare that. But this is not the area used for monitoring El Nino. This is a very noisy region. It can get really hot there, never make it into the El Nino monitoring region. So let's take a look. So here we go. Here's the Nino 3.4 region. And as you can see, it got really warm there around February 12th or so. But then cooling, La Nina kind of pulsed a little bit, took the edge off it somewhere in here in the early March time frame. It's trying to claw its way back. Notice the scale is different here too. It's only plus 0.385, so 0.4 of a degree above normal, which is, normal basically. So from the main area for monitoring El Nino, things are just normal, nothing exceptional, though there is this hint of something going off along the South American coast. We'll see whether it makes it this far to the west and actually starts positively influencing this index over the next several months. So the ocean is the tip of the spear. And then the atmosphere, over a significant amount of time, if the ocean stays warming, continues this trend, at some point, typically 3 to 4 months out, then the atmosphere starts picking up on it. It's a big boat. It takes a long time to turn. It's still right now sensing La Nina. And so this index, the Southern Oscillation Index, measures the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When the index starts falling, meaning more low pressure over Tahiti, that suggests El Nino. When the index is positive, that suggests high pressure over Tahiti, and that suggests La Nina. Right now, the daily numbers, you can eyeball it. You can also see pulses of the MJO in this. Right now, it's kind of neutral-ish. I mean, if anything, biased a little bit positive, suggesting maybe La Nina. But the 30-day running average, a good way to filter out some of the noise. You can see it's been negative. Actually got quite a bit negative here. Peaked out about March 15th, and now it's rapidly backing off. Still, by negative, this isn't really negative. It was down around minus 15 or so. Then we'd start getting really interested. But minus 5 doesn't mean a whole lot. And right now we're at minus 1.63. The 90-day running average. Oh, and this is also good for better for taking the noise out, monitoring the MJO. So this suggests, if anything, we were in some sort of a weak active phase, and maybe we're moving out of it, but the models we saw suggest no, we're just starting to move into the active phase of the MJO. Then the 90-day running average, you can use this for sort of monitoring La Nina, El Nino. It's basically neutral right now, 0.34, and has been holding that way. So neither La Nina nor El Nino, just a neutral pattern is suggested in the atmosphere per this index. Now the ESPI index, same sort of deal, measures differences in precipitation north of Australia and then over a broader area in the Pacific, equatorial Pacific. If the index is negative, as it is, minus 1.08, suggests much drier or drier conditions here, synonymous with La Nina. And so this index suggests La Nina is still in effect, at least in the atmosphere. We know warming is going on here and along in here. At some point, this index is going to respond to that. The warming really needs to, ocean temperature warming needs to make it further out here towards the date line. Right now it cuts off somewhere. The bulk of the warming is over in here, kind of out of reach of this index. See how big this footprint of this block is? So that's over in here. We need to see more precipitation over in here, and that will probably come, but it'll take time. So right now, this is still suggesting La Nina. Here's the CFS prediction. What's going on with El Nino, La Nina? Currently, January 2017, we were neutral. Water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region. Per right now, where are we? We're in some mid-March, somewhere in here. This suggests about plus 2 to 3/10 of a degree, something like that. That's probably about right. But notice the trend as we get into April, early May, up to plus 0.75 or maybe 0.8. And then up to plus 1 degree above normal in July. building to 1.4 degrees in October, November. That seems very optimistic given the limited amount of warm water in the West Pacific. But this is one model's view suggesting we're moving towards a La Nina pattern. Then here is the summary of all the models, dynamic models, and there's a whole bunch of them produced by different locations around the planet, and statistic models, all lumped onto one chart suggesting what the trend is going to be. Some of them as high as an El Nino developing in, so here's September, October, November, 3-month intervals roughly, up to 2 degrees above normal, but one as low as minus half a degree. But the spread, and you can see this here, the dynamic average somewhere here, saying maybe 1 degree above normal. So the statistical average somewhere down around half a degree. The CPC consensus average even less than that. So here's the hard data by month for every model. And we'll just pick here, what is this? This is a September time frame. We'll go down here because if you go down here, here's the average of all models. They're saying, 0.8 of a degree, 9 to 0.8 of a degree above normal. So not even 1 degree above normal by the fall. But you know what? Half a degree above normal is considered El Nino if it's for a 3-month period, 3 consecutive 3-month periods running. We certainly see every one of these is for a 3-month period. So you can see clearly by in the next couple of months, theoretically, we could be in some sort of very weak El Nino. This is probably closer to reality, not even 1 degree above normal. But you know what? For next fall, that would be good. That would be enough to feed the jet stream, push the balance in favor of the active phase of the MJO, and we could be in business for another good, at least moderately good winter, assuming this data to be true. So, for the immediate future, looks like surf is on the way. The models are looking favorable. Some gales in the Gulf of Alaska forecast too, and a stronger storm forecast to the far West Pacific. Active phase of the MJO feeding the jet stream, which in turn are feeding the storms. That's positive. And then a month out or so, the La Nina officially dies in the atmosphere. Supposedly westerly anomalies start developing over the Kelvin wave generation area. That should feed the jet stream all the more and eventually turn us away from the La Nina pattern that's still present in the atmosphere. We can see that according to the precipitation ESPI index. But over the next 3 months, that should turn and we'll go back to a normal pattern, if not maybe slightly warmer than normal by the fall, and perhaps a better storm pattern coming. Also, snow in the forecast for the Sierra for the next week. We'll take that. Maybe not piles of snow, but another 3 feet or so. And also up in the north, 3 to 4 inches of rain in the Sierra. In Northern California, we are 11 inches shy of the all-time record set during the 82-83 El Nino for precipitation from a reservoir perspective in Northern California. We'll get 3 more inches on that. That'll get us closer, but we'll still be 7 or 8 inches shy of the all-time record. But the active phase of the MJO doesn't run for a week. It runs for 3 or more weeks. So theoretically, we could be approaching the all-time record. We'll see. We're kind of skeptical of that, but we're running almost 200% of normal rainfall in the northern half of the state. So that is good, getting out of the drought. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.